So firstly, thank you everyone for joining us. My name is Kouparitsas and I'm the Chief Customer Officer here at WithYouWithMe. I'm joined today here by Gina, Meibusch, the Chief R&D Officer for Art of Mentoring, as well as some great panellists who we'll introduce you to very shortly. We're very happy to have you here with us as we explore a topic that I know is front of mind for many leaders, which is how we can build more inclusive leadership pipelines within our organisations. So just to let you know as well that we will be recording the session today and we will circulate a copy of both the recording and the slide deck afterwards so that you have it and also can pass on to anyone who may not have been able to make it. In terms of what you can expect from the session today, I'll kick things off with a little bit of an introduction into the topic of how data-driven leadership development can be approached by organisations in terms of breaking down some of those barriers that have traditionally presented more diversity in leadership. And we'll walk through a bit of a 5-step process that is growing in popularity in this space and will serve as a bit of a backdrop for our panel conversation. Gina is going to take us through a little bit more about the important role that mentoring plays in these strategies, and then we'll be welcoming some truly extraordinary panellists from Women in Digital, Forelight Advisory and Year 13 to really bring the topic to life and share their experiences in tackling this challenge. So if you do have any questions throughout, we've got that chat there. Chris has already said hello, so please feel free to drop comments, questions, and we can address those at the end. Or if we do run out of time, we'll make sure to follow up with you afterwards. Now, I do see a lot of familiar names on the list here, which is great. Many of you coming back from our last webinar too, so a special thank you for that. But there are some newcomers. So what we might do before we kick off, Gina, is just provide a little bit of a snapshot into who we are, just so that you can understand the context of the discussion. So Gina, I'll get you to start if that's okay.
Sure, my pleasure. Thanks, Sia. Welcome, everyone. It is wonderful to see so many different faces. And look, just to let you know a little bit about what Art of Mentoring do, we provide mentoring programs for organisations, corporates, government, including defence, associations also really get a lot out of the kinds of programs that we offer. So I guess what I wanted to emphasise is that our focus is on identifying your business problems or our clients' business problems so that we can help them to utilise mentoring as a way that they can attract, retain, develop, engage their people. So programs that are tailored. We do base it on our expertise, if you like, our experience over literally tens of thousands of mentoring pairs in thousands of programs. I think we're hitting about 1,000 now in our 20 plus years as a business. So the training and support that we give is very much based on practice and research and our own evidence. So we come from a point of strength of expertise and experience, and we run it all on our own bespoke platform, which makes things very streamlined, enables us and our clients to spend our time doing the important things, which is that human touch, because really we're all about connecting people. So we're very proud of our client base, and some of these have been with us for quite some time. And it's really, from a leadership point of view, we see incredible benefits for junior people coming through with the support and encouragement of a more senior experienced person, as a role model, as a professional friend, as a sounding board. And the really great thing, some of the feedback we get from mentors is how much they enjoy being a part of these experiences as well. So I'm really looking forward to sharing with you about how mentoring can contribute to this skills-based approach, and also talking with our wonderful panellists about their various experiences just around this diversity issue, and we're going to touch on mentoring and their experience there as well. So back to you, Sia. Thanks so much. I'm really looking forward to today.
Thanks, Gina, and it's so good to have you here. Mentoring plays such a critical role, as you mentioned, in building leadership pipelines, so very much looking forward to getting stuck into that discussion. And just very briefly, a bit on WithYouWithMe. For those of you who don't know us, we're an Australian founded but a global HR tech company, and we work with organisations to solve the workforce skills challenge, so end to end. That's everything from building skills frameworks to skills mapping current employee skills to see where the benchmark is, but also their potential to learn new skills so that you can start to identify progression pathways through an organisation, and then using those workforce insights to develop really targeted professional development plans or hiring plans that basically help you as an organisation close those gaps. So that is us in a nutshell, and why I'm very excited to tackle this particular conversation today, because I think a skills-based workforce is a great starting point for how we can enable more diversity in leadership. So a little bit of that context for the discussion. I think as HR leaders, we all understand that leadership is the engine of any organisation. But what happens when that engine lacks diversity? I think the issue of inequality in leadership is not just a numbers game or a checkbox exercise. It is a systemic challenge with profound implications when unaddressed for everything from organisational performance to employee engagement and even financial outcomes. I think we've all probably read the research and reports that consistently shows that diverse leadership teams drive better decision-making, innovation, and profitability. Yet the reality in Australia tells a very different story. And I've just popped some stats up here just to paint the picture. Women currently make up just 19.4% of CEOs and 34.5% of key management personnel in ASX 200 companies. And for culturally and linguistically diverse individuals, the numbers are even more sobering. Only 6%. Oh, sorry, I think someone's just not on mute. You might want to just mute that. Thank you. Only 6% of senior leaders in Australia come from non-European backgrounds. So obviously these numbers will vary greatly from company to company. Some are doing better than others, but it does give you a sense of just how far we still are as a society from achieving equality and true inclusivity in leadership. And it's a problem that really needs to be tackled across multiple levels. We have obviously society itself, there's us as employers, but also that individual level. And there is a lot of work underway from a societal perspective. I've popped up there one framework that's gaining increased traction is Hester's 40-40-20 model. So this idea that 40% of leadership roles should be held by women, 40% by men, and 20% of people by any gender. But what I'm really curious about is why this gap persists. We all know it's a problem. We're all taking action to try to address it, but we're still not making those inroads that we need to. And a major reason that I've seen, I think, is a lack of a really structured, data-driven approach for supporting diverse talent into leadership. And without clear advancement opportunities, you get these underrepresented groups, including women, who are often left behind, not due to lack of capability by any stretch, but because the system isn't designed to support their growth. And I think that's why this conversation is so critical. It's really good for us all to be coming together to obviously share our own experiences, hear from those experiences of our wonderful panelists, and hopefully walk away with some actionable next steps that will enable us to make a difference within our organisation. So just before we jump into that discussion, I did want to share an approach that we are increasingly looking to implement, and it's one of those actionable strategies for how you can build that pipeline. And the question here isn't just how to identify women with leadership potential or any underrepresented individual with leadership potential, but it's how to support them into actively achieving these roles. And it requires that structured approach that I mentioned, identifying someone's potential for leadership, mapping where they currently are from a capability perspective, and then supporting them to close any capability or skills gaps through a really tailored development plan. So the first thing I just want to delve into here, I think the first step is always understanding the individual, who they are, what drives them, how they can best succeed. And traditionally, much of this has come down to relying on the direct line manager, which can be how many people slip through the cracks. And this is no disrespect to managers themselves. Often they just have too many staff or not the time to really be considering their people for long-term organisational success, or even potentially unconscious bias. And this is why taking a data-driven approach to identifying leaders at that organisational level is really critical. It's the only way that you can uncover at scale where the potential leaders may be hidden across your business. And for a holistic and objective view of an individual, assessments are a great starting point. I know they're nothing new in HR, but they typically involve a combination of psychometrics, cognitive and learning preference assessments, as well as skills mapping current capability, which I'll get to shortly. I think if you take someone's skills profile and enrich it with psychometric and cognitive insights, you can create that really holistic view of where they are now and their potential to grow, so that you can start to accurately match people to career pathways, projects or roles, and deliver those really targeted professional development strategies. And I've just popped up on the screen a very simple example of how that works in practice using the Big Five assessment, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. But where it gets really interesting is when you analyze these kinds of Big Five insights against aptitude and cognitive assessments to understand not only the skills that someone may be naturally geared towards, but also those they'll likely excel at. I always like to start with this understanding of the individual, though, as it is that way to be truly objective for your people to break down some of those barriers to someone being identified for leadership in the first place. And by then implementing and sharing these data insights at that organizational level, it empowers your divisional heads or your broader HR team to start to identify pockets of individuals who possess these high quality leadership traits that you want to invest in. And it also does wonders, I think, for the individual as well to have that self-awareness and insight into what they may be capable of, because we all know for underrepresented groups in particular, part of the challenge is having them identify that they have the potential in themselves as well. So always great to start with that data. The other data set that I think is critically important is benchmarking that current capability of an individual and where that sits against the future career path for them personally, but also those needs of the organisation. So basically mapping an individual's current skills to future leadership opportunities. Taking a skills-based view of leadership is really important, especially when it comes to enabling greater diversity. And the reason being is that for many organizations, there still exists a predisposition of what a leader should look like. You know, what university did they attend, for example, or have they done a master's degree? And by breaking leadership roles into specific skills, you start to open up your internal talent pool to consider people you may previously have never looked at for leadership, perhaps because of some of that unconscious bias that just exists organically. But you can see who possess exactly what it takes from that skills-based perspective to deliver against the requirements of a leadership position. So shifting to that skills-based workforce is a really powerful step to take in terms of opening up the diverse leadership pathways. I would typically recommend using a skills-based framework like Sophia. For those not familiar, skills framework for the information age. It captures skills for roles across an entire corporate organization and not only has those technical skills that you need to have, but also something called generic levels of responsibility, which really outlines those key attributes for leadership, things like you can see on the screen: autonomy, influence, complexity, business skills. And if you can help your leaders understand where they sit on a multi-level scale against each of these leadership traits, it's great for that self-awareness, but also for clarity and alignment around what your organisation may expect from their leaders. And then once you've got that powerful data-driven view, you start to move to how you can actually close the skills gaps with precision. And I think it's really important to look at the 70-20-10 model here. So 70% being experiential learning. You know, what are the real-world opportunities like cross-functional projects or job rotations that can help leaders develop autonomy and handle complexity? That 20% of social learning, and this is where I'll get Gina to talk shortly about things like mentoring and coaching from experienced leaders to really foster that ability to influence and business acumen. And then around 10% of formal learning. This is those, you know, precision upskilling, short courses, workshops, online training, though making it very, very targeted so that it's super relevant to that individual's actionable next step into that next level. Once you can clearly see the level that someone is currently at and the level they need to be at, you can develop those really targeted professional development plans that cater to the specific needs of that individual. So that's the foundational process that puts you in a really strong data-driven position to start making real change and to entrench the process to remove barriers for people being identified for leadership in the first place, but also then supporting them through the journey in not what is a cookie cutter approach where everyone just does a leadership course, but something that is uniquely tailored to that personal individual. You know, obviously the assessing the leadership, so using tools to really identify who has the potential and how you can best support them, making sure that it's aligned to the organisational objective and those specific roles, so it's not just a general free-for-all, implementing those personal development plans so that someone is being positioned to thrive based off their unique strengths and areas for growth, the precision upskilling, and then really importantly, creating those mentoring networks, pairing emerging leaders with experienced mentors for guidance and support. So on that note, I'll pass back to you, Gina, just to share a little bit more about this role mentoring plays for leadership, and then getting stuck into our panel.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. So, I think what Sia's told you has laid a really strong groundwork for what I'd like to talk about when it comes to mentoring and coaching. Our interest is primarily in mentoring. And I guess by that, what I'm talking about is when you have two people coming together, formally or informally, they may know each other, they may not. We tend to encourage mentorship between people who don't have any kind of aligned relationship, so that there's that real openness and I guess a focus on the mentee, the less experienced person, and what they need and where they want to go. So I guess just that context, it's a relationship over time, over numerous conversations, and we think it provides a really fertile ground for, moving forward in some of these areas that Sia's talked about. So if you could move on to the next slide for me then, Sia. Sia mentioned the 70-20-20 model, and I think it's a really good starting point, because even when it comes to those the 70 and the 10, the non-social learning, experiential learning, we find that people with mentors really get opportunities to be involved in things that they might not normally be involved in. They go looking for opportunities with the help and encouragement of their mentor. So really broadening that experiential learning, and then coming back and being able to talk to their mentor about what it is that they're doing, whether it be in practice or in a course. We don't see mentoring as a teaching relationship as such, but one that really helps the mentee, the junior person, the learner, to contextualize, to embed, to ask the, frankly, the dumb questions about what they're experiencing in a safe place. So, mentoring is a really great safety net, I suppose, for mentees when they go through that experiential learning process. Of course, there's those skills that are hard to teach in any sort of an environment that really involve conversations and questions and dialogue, challenge from the mentor, so that 20% social learning really benefits as well. And the formal learning, as I said, people, and this is something we're moving into more and more in Art of Mentoring, is this idea that having a mentor support a formal learning process, that embedding the safe place to ask questions, the contextualizing can be really powerful as well. So in terms of the slide that you're seeing, I guess what I've done is taken what Sia was saying about the evidence-driven strategies and said, well, mentoring's got a role to play in all of these. What a mentor does is gets very down and personal with their mentee and helps them to understand their own leadership potential. We hear fantastic stories, particularly about women, but also people who are, I guess, somewhat out of the mainstream in other ways as well. So culturally and linguistically diverse people who really benefit from having a mentor to help them overcome that imposter syndrome, take that step, identify what it is that they are capable of and how absolutely appropriate that is for leadership roles that they may not have quite the gumption to go for. And we, particularly in government, we hear a lot about that. But the role of the mentor in recognizing and helping the more junior person to recognize their own leadership potential, assess their gaps, their learning, opportunities. It's the mentoring relationship. Mentorship has a really unique role to play here. Organizational alignment, of course, and professional alignment as well, because the one of the things about mentoring that makes it different from coaching is the understanding of the context. So the mentor has often been there before and can really understand how the mentee's skills, approach, their strengths and weaknesses need to be aligned with the profession or the organisation. And again, within organisations, it's a really powerful way of succession planning, making sure that the mentees are moving in the right direction and that they're undertaking projects and goals that are going to have benefit for them from the point of view of the organisation recognising the benefit that the individuals contribute toward the greater organisational goals. Personalisation, of course, goes without saying. This absolute focus that mentors take on the unique individual's strengths, their weaknesses, the opportunities and threats in their environment, how they best learn, just identifying their areas for growth. So on top of that, what I was saying before about there's a very clear intention in a mentoring relationship that they're looking out for the mentee's well-being and their development. So you're really turbocharging, if you like, your learning and development resources by giving each mentee, each junior developing person, each learner a one-on-one forum, if you like, for their own development and that personalised development plans. We often say to mentors, you don't need to be an HR or an L&D professional to really give some powerful support to a person in their own developmental plan. Sometimes that really strong sense of context, depth and breadth and diversity of experience can be very valuable for the mentees. And never to understate the value of making new networks. So mentors that introduce their mentees to new groups, to new, introduce them to people across the organisation, across the profession is a fantastic, I guess it's just some novelty in the mentee's life, in their professional network, their scope of influence and contact that the mentor can bring. And when they bring in that attitude that they want to create opportunities for the mentor that are meaningful for the mentor's intended path, it's just such a valuable contribution that they can make. So from our point of view at Art of Mentoring, we can really see strong alignment that with the skills-based approach and bringing mentors in to absolutely bolster and customize that for the learner, for the more junior person. And when I say more junior, I really mean less experienced, because we do see lots of occasions where the relationships are flipped on their head, where you've got more senior people being mentored by junior people. The flexibility of these kinds of relationships are wonderful because they focus on a relationship, on mutual respect, on conversations, and really looking for what the mentee, whatever they look like, needs, and being there to help them to progress toward those outcomes. So I am really delighted now to introduce our panelists. I'm so excited about this. 3 amazing people in the room. If you could move on to the next slide for me, please, Sia, that would be great. I'd like to introduce Holly Hunt, who is the CEO of Women in Digital. I'm sorry I've got to read this, Holly, because I'm not really very good at learning facts. It's not my strong point. But I have heard of Women Digital. In fact, I'm a member myself. It's a great organisation that partners with a lot of Australia's technology organisations and industry heavyweights. So, technology is a very broad term. And this forward-thinking approach programs that promote diversity in the industry and encourage professionals to move up the ranks of leadership. So women really getting that that perspective that the skills, the diverse skills that we bring that might come from a different background to what the traditional model of progression looks like is really bolstered by having this support and this expertise. Holly herself, I know, is a passionate leader, founder, mentor, and specialist recruiter herself, who's helping progressive thinking organisations to find emerging talent, existing talent, accomplished female leaders in the digital and technology and cyber sectors. So I'm delighted to introduce Holly Hunt. Annie Mulders is the National Partnership Director at Year 13, and it's an organisation I'd not heard of before, but I'm now delighted to be aware. It is a business committed to helping young people live happier, healthier and more fulfilled lives by doing that transition from school to work in a really healthy and supported way. Annie herself is a very active advocate for young people to prioritise what really gives them meaning, what's their passion, and bring that to their work life in the form of pathways and career choices. And organisations really benefit as well by being able to welcome these committed, passionate people who are enthusiastic and just grabbing opportunities with both hands. These the grassroots, I've seen in my volunteer work and not-for-profit work myself, the enthusiasm at a grassroots level of young people who are given opportunities. And I'm delighted to hear more about Year 13 and how you're putting that into practice, Annie. And finally, and our first speaker for today will be Lucy McClean, who's the Managing Director of Forelight Advisory. But I know Lucy quite well, and she's a passionate advocate and leader in the resources industry, starting more than 25 years ago in a resources exploration company. Over her career, Lucy's been a pioneer in the ESG, environment, safety, social, community and governance sector. So a champion of diversity and inclusion as a part of that and as a personal commitment. And I know that Lucy's got a lot of experience in advocacy, policy, advising, strategy across sectors in energy and resources. Lucy is very well recognised in the industry, having received international recognition in 2022 as one of 100 global inspirational women in mining, the WIM 100. And I'm so grateful to have Lucy here today. In 2023, she was named as Inclusion and Diversity Champion in the Australian National Women in Resources Awards and the New South Wales Women in Mining Awards. My little secret is that I used to be an engineer and I've worked in the mining industry for a very short time. I've got some had some great conversations with Lucy about the experience I had. So I'm personally delighted to hear more today. So we have a terrific panel. If you do have any questions, pop them in the chat. We'll try and appropriately relay them to our speakers. But I would like to begin with Lucy. As someone who's well recognised for your contributions in diversity and inclusion in an industry that's not necessarily taken advantage through history of having wonderful, talented, capable leaders in women. And you have this great commitment as well to mentorship. What have you learned about creating pathways for women in what we've seen as traditionally male-dominated sectors? And I'm very pleased to hear your interpretation of that, Lucy.
So look, thank you so much, Gina and Sia. And look, it's great to be part of this webinar. And look, you know, pathways in traditional fields, so to speak, is never easy, I think is the short version. Otherwise, we wouldn't be where we are. You know, certainly the minerals and mining industry is the least gender diverse industry in Australia, with just 22% female participation. And our numbers in senior leadership is, you know, truly certainly less than 10% for most cases. So look, it's an area where we have a long way to go. Although I think in fairness, it's also important to remember that for the mining industry, as you would know, Gina, from your experience, it can be a tough industry. And it is only around 40 years ago that women were actually legally allowed to go underground in a mine. And even after that, it was still deemed unlucky in many instances. So look, having said all of that, the other way that I like to look at it is that is 40 years ago. So we should surely have moved a long way. And some of the other issues that we're up against in the mining industry is, you know, the perception of the mining industry being dirty and dusty and remote. Whereas, of course, you know, we've got significant workforces in, you know, metropolitan locations, and also just the bias and the issues with remote working in some instances. But look, how we're working towards that is certainly through some great initiatives in the industry and of course in other similar industries that we collaborate with. So of course, as you would know, Gina, that starts with mentoring has been an important part. I have previously been chair of Women in Mining New South Wales, and we've got an award-winning 10-year-old annual mentoring program, which I know has absolutely changed lives, and I'm sure we'll chat about that more. But also it's the other initiatives, the professional development, the collaboration and cooperation and coordination. Although recently we've seen that really we need to do a lot more of that, which is why, together with other leaders, we've only recently initiated an Australian Women in Mining and Resources organisation to really address some of those key challenges that impact certainly the mining industry, but so many other industries. I guess the other way I like to look at it is that if not when, then now is the time. Now is the time with the recent changes in sexual harassment and bullying legislation, with the skills issues that we have in the industry. Absolutely, this is the time when so many of us are really turning our mind to making a significant change so that the generations that come after us don't have the issues that we've had and can really start to tackle the issue of gender diversity and, of course, wider diversity in the industry.
Thanks, Lucy. And I know, you know, we've talked about what's happened over the last 40 years, and one of the great changes, one of the really meaningful changes, is having women like yourself in senior positions who are able to influence, who are able to champion, who are able to be role models. Holly, can I ask you now? You are, you know, the CEO of Women in Digital and a very influential figure in the cyber tech digital world. What have you found to be the significant barriers and also opportunities for women advancing into leadership roles in these sectors? You know, how are organisations addressing this and taking advantage of this incredible talent pool that we know is there?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Gina. You know, one of the biggest challenges we see organisations face is actually making leadership roles enticing enough. So, you know, today as women, we are juggling so much in our lives. We've got careers, we've got family caring responsibilities, we have friends, self-care, education, you know, being a good community citizen. So the list goes on. And we know that for women who have a lot on their plate, they look at it and they go, you know, is it actually worth me taking on this leadership role with everything else that I need to manage. Particularly after having children, I think sometimes a job title and a higher pay packet doesn't necessarily compensate for the time that you get with your family. So, in digital and tech, we're really fortunate that it is largely, a role that can be done from anywhere. So there's incredible flexibility. We recently did a report. We have a lovely Women in Digital discourse available on our website. And half of the respondents said that having children had hindered their ability to progress in their career, to that point exactly. So organizations that I work with, are really focused on offering that flexibility. But we know that, with some organizations requesting that everybody be back in the office full-time 5 days a week, I am a little bit worried that that might go backwards. But some of the companies that I work with that are, doing particularly great job at bringing women back after having children. One particular leader comes to mind from a global technology business. He's got, a strong team of female leaders, and this particular female leader was having a baby, and she was looking at, very focused on, she's in a technical sales role, very focused on her remuneration and the ability to earn bonuses. And she looked at the policies and she said, well, I have to be working actively to receive my bonus. So I might, have an amazing quarter, but if I'm out of work for over 6 months, I actually will no longer receive the trailing benefits. And so her, leader was, she's one of the highest achievers. So he went to the HR team and said, we need to change these policies. We need to make it more appealing for women to be able to take time off and come back to the workforce. So that was amazing, and, really proud of that leader. But secondly, when she came back to work, she's, talking about sleep, weaning, feeding, all of the things. And so I was having a conversation with him, and he said, he was talking about some of the challenges that she was facing with feeding. And I said, well, I've never spoken to a male leader be so comfortable to talk about breastfeeding, cracking nipples, all of the things. And he said, look, it's really uncomfortable, but the more I lean into these conversations, the more likely it is that, we're going to be able to speak about what she needs in her role and coming back to work. And so, he's been able to successfully support her to coming back into a role. But I think on a micro level, that speaks to the importance of mentoring and the importance of having fantastic leaders. It's very rare to have a male leader be able to lean into those conversations, which I think, again, says we need more female leaders that are able to progress their careers and provide that mentoring and that guidance to more junior women coming through those life challenges that we're all facing.
They're fantastic points, Holly. And look, I'm really proud to say that at Art of Mentoring, we've got a leadership team that really has great one-on-one conversations. We, involved with their young children, that sort of thing. But I think it's a really great point that you've made, that mentoring contributes to a culture of conversations like that. It's really fundamental that people feel that they can make connections with other people in their organisation and understand the humanness of what it is we go through. It's not just women's problems, they're human being problems. Thank you so much. I appreciate you being very open about that. Annie, I'm going to ask you from the point of view of the younger generations entering the workforce, of course, who have different expectations about a lot of things, really. How can HR leaders and organisations better align their pipelines and their cultures to embrace, younger people, these different values and different perspectives that we see in the public eye? What's that looking like coming into the workforce? And I mean, if you've got anything about the role of mentorship, that would be great to hear. But please let us know what you're seeing in Year 13.
Thanks, Gina. Look, at Year 13, we've got a range of generations on the team, and the values and the perspectives of those young people are really at the heart of our decisions and at the heart of our culture. So the most important thing, I think, in building leadership pipelines is really providing those young people with the opportunity to provide input and feedback as a key part of the decision-making process. So not as a side hustle. It needs to be more than just asking for survey feedback. It's actually about having those diverse perspectives embedded into the decision-making process. And so we are a very youth-focused organisation. So potentially we're at the other end of the extreme. But on the Year 13 side of our business, we've actually got leaders on our leadership team that have got 5 to 8 years experience. And, they're core to our everyday decisions, but they're also core to our business strategy and our growth. So it's a flatter structure. There's a lot less hierarchy, and, all the perspectives are equally valued. value. So, you know, it's very much about, you know, embedding young people's views as part of the culture that I think is something that moves it forward. And so on the second part of your question with regard to mentorship, look, we view it as imperative to building our future leadership pipelines. And, you know, I think one of the unsung heroes of mentorship is actually the provision of opportunities. So I loved that you touched on that. So, you know, to really impact the leaders of the future, mentoring sort of needs to go beyond support and advice and into that enablement and opportunity. So at Year 13, we mentor young people live in the marketplace, not just internally. It's not just advice, it's action. So our young people are empowered to work on our biggest initiatives. We put them in front of our biggest clients. We engage them in our strategy and our big decisions. And so to give you a bit of an example, I'm the partnerships director at Year 13, but more often than not, I'll co-lead a major presentation or a pitch with someone that's a Gen Zer who's in their first 2 or 3 years of the workforce. And so providing young employees with those real traditionally senior opportunities is really key to fueling that future diverse pipeline. And one of the things I also think, which I've really learned coming to Year 13, you know, I come out of really big, large scale media companies as a background, so quite hierarchical. Our customers love it. Our customers love hearing from our young people. They want their perspective. It's a real win-win. So it's great for our future leaders. It's great for our young people, but it's also great for our business. So, you know, for us, it's about embedding it at the heart.
Yeah. Just something to add to that, Annie, because Gina, you kind of touched on it earlier. I love the idea of the reverse mentorship as well, so that the young person has so much to learn from someone who's experienced and walked that path before and can teach some things like influence and business acumen, but also that important role that our younger people have to teach the established leaders about how the world of work is changing and how they can be better leaders themselves.
Absolutely. Yep. I've learned more at Year 13 than I think I've learned in my last 10 years. I've been at Year 13 for 3 years now. And, you know, I had quite a traditional career trajectory, but now I'm embedded with these young people day to day. Yeah. And I learn just as much from them, and so do our customers.
Yeah. So thank you, Roger, very much for that question about, you know, the mutual nature of the mentoring relationship. I'm going to actually throw back to Holly now, and on that whole idea of providing opportunities. Holly, what have you been doing in terms of structured or formal or encouraging informal mentorship within Women in Digital, and what are you seeing coming out of that, please? What's been your experience?
Well, I mean, you know, the fact that your entire business is focused on mentoring shows how much there is to running a very structured mentoring program. So the way in which we facilitate mentoring and connect people in their careers is through sort of bite-sized events. So we'll do speed mentoring events or roundtable mentoring events, and that's a fantastic way for those introductions to happen and, you know, for individuals to go off and facilitate their own relationships outside of, you know, an organization. You know, one of the things that I've seen to, you know, another story would be we had a speed mentoring event, and we had a, you know, young lady graduate who was coming out of a business degree, and she was really looking at a fork in the road and saying, do I go down, you know, sort of a business pathway, marketing maybe, or do I take a technical route? And she was really fortunate to meet a leader from a, you know, national technology business at that speed mentoring event. And he, you know, come down to our office, check it out, take a look around. I'm your point of contact. I'm going to support you. So she ended up moving into, you know, a technical BA role. And, you know, I think that opportunity for him to be that, you know, point of guidance and support at such a pivotal stage of her career where she was really deciding, you know, is technology for me? I'm not sure. Or do I take, you know, the route which a lot of my friends have taken? So, you know, I think there's so much value and so much that mentoring and those facilitated introductions can do to grow the diversity in the industry.
And look, the reason we exist, and you touched on it there, is just this idea that we do create these opportunities for people to come forward that have a mindset that I'm here to help this person to understand their world in a different way, to give them a different perspective, maybe challenge, push back a little bit on the imposter syndrome or the assumptions, that sort of thing. So thank you very much for that. And Lucy, what's your personal experience? I know that you've had considerable personal experience as a mentor. Can you share a story with us about where you see it fitting into the equation, and we'd love to hear about what you've experienced personally.
Yeah, look, thanks so much, Gina. So with our annual program at Women in Mining New South Wales, I've been a mentor for many, many years. After being tapped on the shoulder by a committee member, of course, my initial reaction was really me. Could I do that? Could I be a mentor? Which I think is also quite common. But look, and that might have got me into being a mentor, but what has kept me is that amazing connection that you have and that privileged opportunity to have those one-on-one conversations. And because as a mentor, you get out of it just as much as the mentee. So look, it has been such a privilege. And, certainly I've had mentees who've had promotions while being on parental leave, who've made amazing changes in directions, one who made a very difficult decision. We had tears, we had laughs, we had everything, but she made a huge decision to take on a PhD. And in fact, when she graduated from that 3 or 4 years later, she was very kind. She acknowledged me in the post. But look, I've had it has been such, those journeys are amazing. But look, also the program, we wanted to promote the program to a wider diversity of applicants. And so in fact, a couple of years ago, just after I'd got all these amazing accolades, I actually said, well, I'll be a mentee. So I took on becoming a mentee. And in fact, it was fabulous because it puts you in that position. It flips that dynamic. And I think, in fact, it has made me a better mentor because it reminds you that it can be challenging to have those conversations, to be vulnerable, to open yourself up, to really think about you for a change, which, as you said, Holly, often we don't do at this age and stage where you're doing everything else. So look, it has been an amazing opportunity, and it's certainly a program that just keeps going from strength to strength because it absolutely is life-changing.
Thanks so much, Lucy. And look, it's been an honour for me to be, to have witnessed what's happening in that particular program, as with some other programs that I've been a part of. Sia, I'm going to actually throw it over to you. Did you have something that you wanted to ask our panellists on top of what we've spoken about today?
Look, I think you've just shared beautiful real-world insights that are super relevant. I would love to finish maybe just with one tip for each of you to organisations who are looking to implement programs to enable leaders to diversify their leadership. What would that one tip be? We might start with you, Annie.
Look, my one tip is if you have a vision for a diverse future leadership team, you need to be embedding those values that you're offering to young people early. You have to interrupt while they're at school making those decisions. I loved that story Holly just told. The fight for talent is real, and the fight for diverse talent is also real. So we need to be supporting them and helping them from the outset whilst they're making the very earliest career decisions.
Beautiful. Thank you, Annie. Holly?
For me, I think, one of the most important things is for leaders to lean into getting to know their team, or HR leaders to lean into getting to know the experiences of the women within the organisations. To quote another statistic, a third of women in the technology industry that we surveyed felt that there was an entrenched boys club. And that is probably something that a lot of, males are not aware of. It's not always a conscious choice to create these structures. And so, leaning in and understanding how do we create belonging and what does that look like? How do we make this a better workplace? I think it starts with an honest, open conversation and a genuine interest to hear the answer.
I love that. And that point on belonging, and it kind of also feeds into the question Roger popped in the chat, which is, do you have a singular program to address these kinds of challenges? And I know we focused a lot on supporting women into leadership for this call, but, is it one approach for the organisation, or do you have multiple different approaches from diversity groups? And I would suggest there's probably many ways that you can answer that. At the heart, though, understanding that individual and that idea of belonging, I think that you touched on, Holly, is really powerful.
Thank you. And, I would love to say as well, I think, for men, it needs to be about belonging, because we can't have men feeling like they're not part of the solution or they are the problem. I think this, having equality and diversity in the industry is everybody's problem and opportunity.
Well said.
Yeah,
and Lucy?
Yeah, look, I think the one thing for me would be absolutely, or maybe I can squeeze it to two, would be a commitment from senior leadership. And then absolutely, I guess, coming from a scientific background, you need to measure it. You know, I know a female managing director of a mining company or a mining area, which was, you know, pretty unusual. She said, of course, we don't have a gender pay gap. And she went, we measured it and we did. So it's issues like that is really important, but also to measure it and to own what the current status is. And then that will drive initiatives and ensure that the measurements and those KPIs are absolutely put in front of the board, because then absolutely, again, with the old adage, what gets measured gets monitored,
gets done.
absolutely gets done, and what gets incentivized gets done a little bit better. So
Yeah.
So yeah, look, certainly I think that's a great way to start.
I think that's it's such a powerful segue as well, I think, just to summarize, which is this idea that, you know, we've spoken today about all of the wonderful initiatives that we can implement to support greater diversity and leadership and to support the individual. But at the end of the day, what we also need is that really structured, data-driven approach to make sure that this is something that can be operationalized, that can be lived and breathed across the organization. It's not a point solution. I think we've covered very much the importance of taking a personalized approach, but we also need to make sure that we have those programs, structures and frameworks set up, and the measurable outcomes that you mentioned, Lucy, just to make sure that you can prove to a business that this is something that's not only viable and sustainable, but absolutely critical to business success, to go back to those points I made at the start. Now, we will wrap up there. I'm conscious that we are right on time. But Gina, thank you so much for facilitating that discussion. It was fascinating. And Lucy, Holly and Annie, appreciate your time so much in sharing your unique value. I think you all sit at the apex of your various areas, have that kind of diverse experience as to how people may start to think about the problem and tackle some solutions. Has just been wonderful. So thank you very much for that. If you do have any other questions, thank you to everyone who participated in the chat. If you do have any other questions, please feel free to reach out to us afterwards or pop those in there as well. And we can work with the panelists to come back to you. And we will also send you that recording and that slide deck. So thank you again, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of your day and hopefully see you for the next one.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.